Welcome back to the weekly news roundup, and our first topic is the government data buys. Yes, government is still buying our data. There have been attempts to shut this down. Ron Wyden is back at it again. I hope Ron Wyden, as much as I really want term limits, the only senator I see that's fighting back against all this surveillance is Ron Wyden. So please stay in office. He's the only one that we should have the exception for those term limits. We should have term limits, though, for most people. Who knows? But anyway, that being said, he's been in the news again trying to get this shut down. Of course, we have our illustrious Patel, who is the FBI director. We are buying data that is coming from data brokers consistent with the Constitution. So yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense. Let's go ahead and have a look at what's going on here. Why is the FBI buying people's location data, and how is it using it? And I would like to add a third question into this that the Guardian didn't get into. Where is it? Where is that data coming from? That's a good question, because when we can get the answer to that, we might be able to do something about it. Might. Stress. So how does the information get into the hands of the government in the first place? How can federal law enforcement use the information to track their whereabouts? The Supreme Court has even ruled the Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, prohibits warrantless collections of individuals' location histories. However, buying such information from people who offer it for sale apparently is a workaround. This is what Wyden is trying to get rid of, is that loophole. He basically says it would be completely illegal for the government to have any information on a person that is not obtained with a warrant. So you can't buy it. You can't install the bug. You can't do all these things. I mean, you think about it, all of the things you have to do to get the wiretapping. Remember all the old shows. You got the FBI plumber van, kind of like my van, with mine that says FBI surveillance van on the side, the broadcasting Wi-Fi. I just do it just to throw off suspicion, really. I mean, the FBI wouldn't possibly do that. Of course, that one mentally ill woman in the park that I parked next to one time really thought I was with the FBI. That's a fun story for another day. But what did Kash Patel say? Wyden told Patel that his predecessor, Christopher Wray, testified in 2023 that the FBI did not at that time purchase location data derived from internet advertising, although he acknowledged that it had done so in the past. Not like we haven't gone into the marketplace today, Mr. Wyden, but I mean, we might tomorrow. We do purchase, this is what Kash Patel says, we do purchase commercially available information that is consistent with the Constitution and the laws under the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, which has led to some valuable intelligence for us. I thought the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against unreasonable searches and seizures. We didn't put a bug there. We just bought it. I mean, they agreed to the terms of service of the app that sent the data over. And that's why I want to get into how does that data get there to give you guidance on that. So they do purchase commercially available data, the same type of crap that you find everywhere else. Get rid of that stupid thing. Okay. There's the Guardian. We care about your privacy. Why does every website in the world say we care about your privacy, right as it adds a privacy tracker, like an analytics tracker that follows you around the internet? You clearly don't care about my privacy. Stop lying to me, So anyway, I just want to say at the start, this debate, doing that without a warrant is an outrageous end run to the Fourth Amendment. It's particularly dangerous given the use of artificial intelligence to come through massive amounts of data. That was what Wyden said. And don't forget, we did cover the story a couple weeks ago where it is becoming increasingly simple to simply say to AI, hey, find out who's doing this anonymous internet post. And they'll go around to the internet and figure it out. So where does the data come from? So they do ask it. It's just not in the title. It comes from our phones. That's right. You need to stop relying on that techno tracker, that privacy invader in your pocket. It's tracking your every movements. It's listening to every conversation. It might even be spying on you. I don't know. I looked at I have this iPhone for this project I was working on. I was looking at the battery was much lower than I was like, what's going on? So I pulled the thing up, and the camera is using a bunch of battery. Now, mind you, I've not touched the camera since I set the phone up 3 weeks ago, but apparently the camera was using 24% of the battery. I'm like, how's that happening? Mind you, the phone actually sits in a dark corner of a desk underneath a bunch of stuff. I should actually throw it in the Faraday bag, but I actually do need to keep it available to pass some messages and things for what I'm working on. So there's that. So, the innocuous way to check your weather or plan a journey. And I got news for you guys. You do not need to turn on your location services to check your weather. Okay. First and foremost, I'll tell you that those weather apps they don't have a precise exact weather for exactly where you're at. They'll ping your location, track that location. They'll track the precise location, and then they'll go to the nearest city to you. Now, the average person listening to this is not as robust at travel as I am as a van dweller, where I legitimately might be 2 hours away from where I was yesterday. All right. But even for me, it's super simple. Like even on like any of these apps, it's super simple to go in there and say add location or change location. I can do that manually in the same amount of time it takes the GPS to query the location. But the difference is no third-party company has collected and stored that data in the process. So turn location off. I know it's like, but what if my weather changes? Your weather is not going to change as you would drive across town, which is what the average person does. Okay, it is going to be delivering the weather from the exact same place. All right, so, but if you innocuously check your weather with the GPS location on your phone turned on, you're giving that data, that location data to the government. Congratulations. What can they do with it? It's going to be anything from where you go after work or where you sleep and who do you do these things with. It's possible to track what phones are near each other, which can shed light on who you're spending time with. That's right. If you happen to be, follow a route similar to another guy who happens to be on a watch list and you both stop at the same gas station within 10 minutes of each other several times, they're going to start spying on you too, because that's what they like to do. So who's selling the data? Data brokers. The industry, I think, should be completely abolished. Nobody should have any digital information on me unless I have given them very explicit permission to do so with a very specific purpose and time. Okay, companies do not need us. Even your customer laws do not need to be storing a bunch of data. Sure, have a single gatekeeper. Okay, yep, we verified that person. That's it. Done. Okay, and then you don't need to store any data. To have a simple field, has an employee verified this, and give us a random employee number that if you need to, the bank can go and offline records and figure out who verified that. Maybe have an offline record of that thing. It sits in a filing cabinet in the bank rather than on some insecure database that's already infested with like Chinese and Russian hackers. They're over there. They're like hacking each other. It's kind of like, have you ever seen that episode of Leverage, and you have Chaos versus who was the guy, the tech guy in the team you followed, right? Hardison. Is it Hardison? I think it's Hardison and versus Chaos are fighting each other over the security cameras, and I got the lasers and the security cameras. You get all this kind of stuff going. All those Russians and Chinese guy are in the database anyway, stealing all the data. You don't want to give it to either one of them. Get them out of there. Of course, data brokers operate with no oversight. Of course, if you spend time reading the policies, they'll have like carve-outs for every state that actually has laws about the data brokers. But it's like, if you're in this state, this applies. If you're in this state, this applies. You're in this state, this applies. You're in any other state, you're just screwed. They should just write that in the policy. If you don't live in one of these states, you're just screwed. There's no regulation. We can do anything and everything we want with all of this data we have collected, including selling it to the government so that they can track you. Is that wonderful? And then, of course, now we're talking about, de-siloing all the data with Palantir. How wonderful is that? Does all the data that Kash Patel buys, does that get fed into Palantir to de-siloing the data as well? I don't know. So anyway, the data brokers cash in on large volumes of granular location data about people's phones. So when you give an app permission to see your location, you're also giving the other companies whose software is embedded to that app access to your location as well. And this really is the scam that most people do not know about. So one data broker bought data from a Muslim prayer and dating apps before the information ended up with the U.S. military. Would they like to know all that? Well, why does it have all that? Well, because the Muslims have to pray a certain number of times during the day, facing a certain direction. You need that location data to know exactly which direction you're going. So, that's why you need it. And then, of course, the government uses it to bomb them. No. Let's not. Thank you. All right. Data brokers can incentivize app developers to sell user data by paying for direct access to their device, which can now allow data brokers to obtain location data when the app is open or, in other cases, whenever the phone is on, even if the app is closed. So data brokers have taken advantage of the vulnerability to harvest data at staggering scales. So what are they doing with it? Of course, the big thing here, undocumented immigrants and others who may be entering the U.S. unlawfully, they look for cell phone activity in unusual places, such as remote stretches of the desert that straddle the Mexican border. Internal U.S. Customs and Border Patrol documents showed the agency used location data from online advertising industry to track phone locations. And they say on the March 3rd for an investigation of the warrantless purchases of Americans location data by ICE and DHS. So let's be clear. I want all of the illegal immigrants to be deported. I do not want the government to be tracking everybody's phones looking for them. I think that those crazy sanctuary cities that are allowing people to completely tear them apart from the seams, when they find somebody, they should be forced to look into, are you here illegally? And if not, they should hand them over to ICE. That's what should be done. And I got news. If you've been closed to the border to begin with for the last 5 years, and then you actually handed the criminals over as you're catching them committing crimes so they can be properly deported because they're not here lawfully, guess what? We would not have a situation that we need to hire all of these ICE agents to look for everybody. Just a thought. So I agree with getting the illegal aliens out, particularly if they are committing crime. Like if you're over here and you're here illegally and you're not otherwise breaking a law, and so we haven't tracked you down and you're not under the radar, I am not as inclined to care. Go have fun. But if you're out here like committing crimes, you've had 6-7 deportation orders, and you're still here committing crimes, why on God's green earth would some psychopath like Gavin Newsom sit over here and be like, we should protect this criminal from the ICE agents who want to send him overseas? That's insane. But because that is happening, now we've enabled a situation where the government now feels justified to buy all this data, and it needs to stop. I do not want them buying this data, period. I don't want them to do it. But you force them to do it by failing to cooperate and getting rid of the people who are legitimately committing bad, violent crimes. Okay, and I know I just irritated. I can hear the keyboards going. You're getting all your politics into. Yeah, the fact we haven't gotten this much politics and stuff is why now we're all battling in Linux over age verification. Thank you. Which, by the way, I reported on that California law 6 months ago. Did y'all see that video? I don't know. Interesting. Who's pushing back? Mostly Ron Wyden. That's about it. Couple other people here and there, but everyone else looks at it going, oh, I don't know, man. This is profitable. I kind of like this kind of stuff. I mean, 1984, that wasn't a dystopia in the world. That was a playbook. So the EFF over here, the government uses targeted advertising data to track your location. So they're using the advertising networks because here's a fun thing. When somebody goes in to buy an ad, and that's what they're doing. Somebody goes in to buy an ad. Everybody who bids to buy the ad gets the location data for that device. All right. And then it's very easy to de-anonymize that data. For years, internet advertising industry has been sucking up your data, including location data, to serve as, quote, more relevant ads. You know, the most relevant ad for me is to not see it. The most relevant ad to switch to Linux is an invisible ad. Okay. Let me be clear. I don't want to see your advertisements. All right, so there's your relevant ad. You're going to show me an ad, show it to be something related to the website I'm on. I'm on the website because I want to read it, you know. But of course, they want to use all of these things to track all these phones. And so this article, they pretty much go through a lot of how this stuff works. So key vulnerability of real-time bidding is that while only one advertiser wins, all participants receive data about the person who would see the ad. Anyone posing as an ad buyer can access a stream of sensitive data. So in FTC found location data broker Mobile Walla collected over 1 billion people with an estimated 60% sourced from RTB auctions. You've all heard of these companies, right? Come on. You've all heard of these. Come on. Of course, leaked data from another data broker, Gravy Analytics, referred to thousands of apps, including Microsoft, Candy Crush, Tinder, Grindr, MyFitnessPal, pregnancy trackers, religious focus apps. When confronted, several of these apps developers had never heard of Gravy Analytics, the very company that their apps are feeding all this stuff into. All right. So here's the way, if you're unfamiliar with how apps work, there's a bunch of just libraries, and you're building an app and you're hiring some developer to build an app, or in some groups, like this is big in church apps. If you go to a church, it's like download our app. If you go to a church that has a church app, you need to get with the board of your church and tell them to discontinue that immediately. Every one of those is white labeled from data analytics companies. In fact, almost all those apps trace back to only 2 companies. Both of them are involved in buying, selling, and trading your personal data as a member of that church. They know how much money you donate. They know when you go to church. They know what mailing lists you're on. They know what Bible studies you're going to. They're doing all of these things because it's one whitelisted company that then outsource it to somebody else. And then when they build these apps, they just grab a bunch of these libraries. And many of the libraries that do easy basic functions that you would otherwise have to manually program, but hey, the library is already written. Those libraries have the data analytics trackers embedded inside of them. And so all of these app companies are probably feeding one of these companies, which are then going back to the government. So, you may trust the current administration with knowing that you go to some Bible-believing church, but will you trust the next administration with knowing that you're going to a Bible-believing church? You see, this is that turnkey government that Edward Snowden was talking about. And half of the people listening to this, if you haven't already turned it off in the previous discussion, half of the people maybe that started listening to this really like one side of the government and really hate the other side. But here's the thing. We have not had, if you go back and look at this, we have not had a different person of the same party win the presidential election since the 80s. That is the last time. I would think it was Reagan to Bush was the last time we had a Republican who was a different person win the White House. Since then, it went Republican, and then a Democrat, and then a Republican, and then a Democrat. Some of them gaining just 1 term, some of them gaining 2 terms. But it was Democrat, then Republican, then a Democrat, then the Republican. If the people in office like you now, the people in office in 4 years will hate you. So you do not need to be giving any of your data to these organizations, because at some point in time, somebody is going to use that data against you. So what can you do? Well, you can disable your mobile advertising ID. You can review the apps that granted locations. I think these are woeful. You can use Graphene OS. The other thing you can do, I use on my Graphene OS, since I can't modify the host file, I use a custom DNS provider. I'm using NextDNS because it fits my current van dwelling lifestyle. If I had a place to live, I would actually host my own custom DNS. That DNS system blocks every method of tracking me on the internet. So really the only thing that can track me right now is the cell towers. And the cell phone company doesn't have my real name. So there's always that. So that's the thing. The other thing, I'm going to throw a few other lists here that EFF did not do. Do not install any unnecessary apps on your phone. In fact, don't install any proprietary apps because you don't know what they're doing. They don't know how they're collecting data. Use things like F-Droid, where you can download apps that are compiled. They do not have the trackers in them, things like that. There's some discussion on tech makers and lawmakers, tech companies and lawmakers. So how must they stop using the precise location for target advertising? They're not going to do that. Good luck with that. Remove advertising IDs from devices, or at a minimum disable them by default. There's some discussion here with Apple doing that. They said 96% of U.S. users opted out when asked, hey, would you like us to spy on you like a crazy stalker? No. So legislators can and must close the data broker loophole in the First Amendment. And I'm just globally call for just the abolishment of the entire data broker industry. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and end with a couple of case studies for you, okay? So case study number 1, if you guys remember a couple years ago, maybe about a decade or so ago, all these insurance companies really wanted, dude, I'm not interested in your crap. Stop giving me pop-ups, cyber guy. About a decade or so ago, all these insurance companies, like the car insurance companies, are like, hey, you could save 10% by putting this crazy black box in your car that's going to spy on everything you do. And most people back then are going, I don't think so. Couple morons did. Most of those guys ended up paying more, because what those boxes did is they basically collected everybody's data that opted into these, and then they scored everybody. The people in the top 10%, they got a 10% reduction. The 80% in the middle got no change, and the 10% on the end got basically a double. And so the insurance company was making the exact amount of money. They were just getting a lot of data on you instead. And they were maybe in a positive way shifting the risk. If you legitimately are a good driver, you will probably end up paying a little bit less, and the company's going to make their money back on the guy who's probably paying a little bit more, except they might actually have to pay out more claims on that guy. But most people look at this and said, I'm not doing this dystopian crap. So Allstate had an idea. They're like, well, nobody wants our dystopian crap. What's going on with this? What can we possibly do? So what they ended up doing is they ended up creating a new company. And this is it Arty? What is it? Arty. They created a company called Arty. So what Arty is it's one of those cell phone app creation data tracking libraries. That it needs your gyroscopic data, which tells them how fast you're braking, how quickly you're turning. It needs the GPS data to know, how fast you're going and things like this. So what they did is they built this thing and then they sold this to all sorts of app companies. And then they just figured out how can we do this? We have to create a bunch of apps that they're going to be free, so lots of people are going to download them, and then they're going to do something that sounds really cool on the surface. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pay millions of dollars for creators to tell all of their audience to, just for free, download Gas Buddy. You can save money on gas. Well, Gas Buddy had to have your location on. It had to have access to all these trackers. So all y'all put on Gas Buddy like a moron, and then sitting there like, I can get the cheapest price on gas now, man. Which, by the way, again, I am a van dweller. I have driven all the way around the United States 5 times now, and I can still find the cheapest gas without Gas Buddy. I don't know if you were aware of this. You can go into Google Maps without an account. So this is not an account, not on anything that can track me. Go into Google Maps and type in gas station. It will give you a list of the gas stations and their prices. And I can look at that list and go, which roads am I driving on? Oh, okay, I'll stop at that gas station. It's just a little bit of preemptive planning. Okay, but what they were relying on is people aren't going to do this. And even you people that stay in the same town, in the same town, if you are paying attention, if you're driving with your eyes wide open, I know half of you drive by faith and not by sight, but if you're driving with your eyes wide open or drive through town, you know where the cheapest gas is. In fact, one time I'm driving through California and I stopped by a visitor center. I said, hey, I'm getting a little low in gas. Where's the cheapest gas? And she said, well, you go this way, you go into town, you take that Y, and there's a store there that's super cheap. I'm like, cool, thanks for the tip. Now, I could have gone onto my maps and found it, but I listened to that. I went down there, and there was a massive line because the gas was 20 cents cheaper than anywhere else in the state of California. All right. So I was like, oh. So people from this area know where the cheap gas is. So does anybody legitimately need Gas Buddy on their phone? No. But Gas Buddy's entire purpose was to sit on your phone and have you have your Bluetooth on and your GPS on and your gyroscopic sensors on so it can track everything you're doing. And voila! Allstate just put that same device everybody rejected in everybody's car. They did Life 360, they did Gas Buddy, and what was the other one? My Radar. Those were the 3 big apps. So then, of course, the report came out that basically Arty then sold that data because Allstate's into making money. Who else might want that data? LexisNexis might want that data. So now LexisNexis buys a whole bunch of your car behavior driving data and then turns around and sells it to every single insurance company. So now every single insurance company knows exactly who you are and how you drive. And that's why a bunch of people got their rates adjusted a few years ago. Because you downloaded some free app from some guy. Okay, guys, if it is a free app and they're paying tens, if not thousands of dollars to content creators to promote that free app, maybe, just maybe, you are the product being sold. So in Texas, Ken Paxton files a lawsuit against Allstate about this. They say that they collected the location data for 45 million American smartphones, and Allstate and its subsidiary Artery unlawfully collected, used, and sold data about location data. I don't know if that's specifically illegal in Texas. I guess it must be. Allstate and other insurers then used the covertly obtained data to justify raising Texas insurance rates. The data was reportedly used to build the world's biggest driving behavior database, which, by the way, I have never had an app installed on my device that could possibly do this for at least a decade. I stopped using mainstream phones a decade ago. I switched to Nexus, Lineage OS on a Nexus 5X a decade ago. Now I'm using Graphene. I still have some Lineage phones and things like that. All right, so our investigation revealed that Allstate and Artie paid mobile apps millions of dollars to install Allstate's tracking software. The personal data of millions of Americans was sold to insurance companies without their knowledge or consent in violation of the law. Texans deserve better, and we will hold these companies accountable. So Artie helps consumers get the most accurate auto prices after they consent to a simple, transparent way that complies with regulations. That's what Allstate said in response. So that part in red there, that is the PR person. What was this? Like, did you guys know that installing Gas Buddy, you're doing that? Well, if you would have read the 37 pages in the terms of service, you might have been able to infer that. But who reads those anymore? I mean, you just want free gas. Okay. So car insurance companies secretly collected the data. So I include this one just to get the list of apps. Life 360, MyRadar, and Gas Buddy were the three biggest ones. Allstate-owned company Artie, which computes the numbers to create the driving score, takes that into account any risky behavior behind the wheel, such as distracted driving, speeding, and sudden braking. Like sudden braking, like what'd you do to avoid a car accident? Okay, Allstate, would you rather I suddenly brake and avoid a car accident because a deer ran out in the road, or assume a sudden braking mean I wasn't paying attention? Okay, whatever. So, yeah. And of course I had to include this one, about data collection. This might have more to do with the flock cameras, but Iran built a massive video surveillance network so that could control the dissent. All the people that disagree with the government, we're going to go and gulag them. So Israel used that. They hacked into those cameras and they tracked their targets, and that was the data that they used to bomb their targets. Guys, we need to stop with data collection. Israel hijacked Iran's street cameras, and the killing of the country's supreme leader underscores how surveillance systems are increasingly being targeted by adversaries in a wartime. So, yes, we're going to put these cameras up so we can find the people speaking bad about us. Oh, our enemies are now bombing us. February 28th, Israel vividly demonstrated the potential of such system to be hacked and used against adversaries when Israel tracked down Iranian leader the Ayatollah, with the help of Tehran's own street cameras. Yeah, maybe we need to shut down flock cameras. You never know what's going to happen. So anyway, there you go. I think I irritated about half of y'all now, right? Y'all, is anybody still here? Let me know in the comments. That'd be useful info. Let me know your thoughts about all those in the comments down below.